The biggest gap between strong account and weak account isn't spending. And honestly, I didn't realize that at first because when new kingdoms start, everybody talk about spenders. Who bought Minamoto, who bought bundles, who is already ahead, who is going to dominate the KvK. But recently, I was reading a conversation between a new player and some experienced players. And what surprised me wasn't the spending gap, it was the knowledge gap. And the new player was asking completely normal questions. Should I use my AP points? For the people who don't know what is AP points, this is your action points right here. Action points. Should I spend gems on VIP? Is 80 Walker necklace enough? Should I upgrade Chow Chow? This is basically the questions I just read them right now. Basic questions, but the answer exposed something much bigger. Some players are building their account, other players are accidentally building problems. And both groups are only few days into the kingdom. And I'm going to share with you my personal story about my first few days in the new kingdom and what I thought it was actually the important one. One of the important one was I was knowing is going to be the academy. But something that I didn't actually know is what is inside this academy. Because at the first day and the first research, you're going to get this military discipline that is going to give you troop speed 20%. And I think no longer you're receiving anywhere else this extra training speed. You get research, you got defense, you got attack, you got these things. The other thing was I was not quite sure how much important is the forts. Now I have played other kingdom building games and I definitely know that in the forts there is these things here, Book of Covenant, that most likely is going to be something that I'm going to need when I open tier 5. I was not like 100% sure. But something that I didn't know was by doing forts, you're basically returning the value you're spending there. What I mean by that is, for example, this is from the forts, but in the same time, there is a fort trophy, emergency action potion recovery. And at the same time, by doing forts, you may even receive more of those. Okay, right now I may not see what I receive from the forts, but by doing fort, you also have a chance to get action points bringing back to you. So what is happening, something that I didn't know, was you're doing, for example, barbarians, you get some training speed ups, but at the same time you get speed ups and other things by doing forts, and end up only maybe when there is a no walker event. If there is a walker event, obviously it's going to be good to do it for barbarians, but the rest of the time you should do only forts. It's just returning of your investment. You spent 140 points, it may return you up to 100 points from one fort. And if many people are doing that, there's going to be a lot of this chests which can give you even more of this emergency action potion. Something that this is my personal story about my first few days in the new kingdom and what I was thinking it was important. It was important I know the alliance is important, but I didn't know that forts are that important. Because here's the weird part. The new player wasn't making obvious bad decision. Most of them sound reasonable. And I think that's why so many players fell behind. The mistakes don't feel like mistakes. They feel logical, like Walker Trial. Right now we're not having Walker Trial, but a new player was asking if 80 nickels per day was enough. And honestly, that's exactly the kind of question I wouldn't have asked it when I started, because it sounds like the important thing is the nickel. But the experienced players were talking about something completely different. They were talking about action points. Action points action points bottles, barbarians, efficiency. Suddenly, the discussion wasn't about the knuckles anymore, it was about how much value the event was creating. And and that's when I realized something. New players often focus on the rewards. Experienced players focus on the process that generate those rewards. Those are two very different way of thinking. Then I noticed another gap. The player didn't know barb chaining or barbarian chaining, which is completely normal. Most new players don't. But what surprised me was the consequences. Because if you don't understand action points efficiency early, every action point bottle become less valuable. Not just today, tomorrow too, and the next week too. And suddenly one small knowledge gap starts compounding. That's when things get interesting because spending wasn't creating the gap anymore, knowledge was. And this is my personal experience about learning something simple that completely changed my early game progression. Just by knowing that from the forts I have a chance to get more action points, and by getting more action points I do more forts, and if enough people do more forts, okay, right now Dauntless Walker is also a good one. So this is something that I also suggest, go for Dauntless Walker. But if enough people do the forts, there is a bigger chance we get more and more and more and more action points. And if I open my inventory, I'm going to show you how much. Now I use the 50 emergency potions, but I compound them so fast. I didn't even have time to do the 100, the 500, and or the 1000. It's just so much. But this is when you already know, when you already have the knowledge that the force is the way. Then I start thinking about the VIP, because the player asked whether spending gems on VIP was the right choice. And honestly, that question never goes away. Player ask it in every week. Player ask it like before 1 year. But that stood out. But what stood out wasn't the answer, it was the timing. The experienced players immediately start talking about VIP 6. And VIP 6, what is important about the VIP 6 is giving you a second builder. Now, if you're not in rush, you can use some screws for a second builder. But if you want to get the second builder, VIP 6 is the first milestone. After VIP 6, in my opinion, is VIP 10, where for the first time you get legendary commander sculpture, also gold keys, from which gold keys you can get legendary commanders. But yeah, the VIP 6 is actually the first place you should look at. After this VIP 10, long-term value. The new player was worried about today. The experienced player were already thinking a month ahead. And that's where I think many accounts separate. Not because one player has more gems, because one player is making today decisions using tomorrow goals. And this is my example of a decision that looks small at the time but create value for months. I was like, I'm VIP 10 from 1 million power. I didn't even have like 1 million power. And through the time, every day collecting these legendary sculptures for like, I don't think it's like 39 days, but let's say like 20 something days, I compound all these sculptures. And when I open my inventory, I'm having like 163 of this legendary sculpture. Obviously, not everything comes from the VIP, but I can say 20 something sculptures actually come from the VIP, which, in the future, because this is, universal sculptures, in the future, when the new hero that is meta hero arrive in the game, I'm going to be able to max this hero way more faster, because this small decision I decide to do, and that is to hit VIP 10, I think at the day 4 or 5. Or maybe, I don't think it was day 4 or 5. I think it actually cost me like 1 week before I hit VIP 10. And I was spending all the gems I get in the VIP from everywhere. you know. So I managed to get it, and this is how it compound for me and how I get so many golden sculptures. Then I noticed something even more important. The players was asking which commander to invest in. Again, completely normal, but the experienced players weren't just naming commanders, they were asking a different question. What march do you want to play? And honestly, I think that question changed everything, because the new player often invests first and create a plan later. Experienced players create a plan first and invest. And those are two approaches lead to completely different accounts. Then things got a little scary, because I start realizing that most of those mistakes don't look dangerous. Nobody wake up on the day 3 and say my account is ruined. That's not what is happening. Instead, a player spent, action point inefficiently, then delayed the VIP, then invest in the wrong commander, then misses an event, then upgrade something they don't use, and eventually individual decisions look small, but together they create a gap that's incredibly difficult to see when it's happening. That's what make early game mistakes so dangerous. The consequences show up much later. And that completely changed how I think about account progression. Because I don't think strong accounts are built by huge decision. I think they're built by dozens of small decisions made it correctly, especially during the first few days. And that's why I disagree when players say spending is the biggest advantage. Spending helps. Obviously, it helps a lot. But spending doesn't teach you what to do. I've been seeing players spend and still make terrible decisions. I've been WoW spender. I have been seeing WoW spender make smart decisions and outperform the expectations. Which means the real advantage might not be the money at all. It might be knowing what matter before everybody else does. And here's my opinion on why knowledge creates the biggest early advantage that most players realize is just by knowing what to do with your action points. This is one of the things. To know, did I not actually claim that? Oh my god. To know that you have to claim 500 action points, to know what to do with their gems, to know when to spend their action points, to know, which commander to get from this bundle, for example, to know so many things, to know that the level 6 VIP is not necessary that fast because you have this builder equipment, and all these things. Having more knowledge is just going to help you crazy by crazy. And that's why I'm making those videos. I'm sharing with you guys what I experienced playing this game, what is the what I spoke with other players, what discovers I make. For some people may not be discovery, but for me it's actually discovering. I'm trying to share my opinion over the knowledge, and this is one of the reasons why knowledge creates a bigger early advantage than most players actually realize. And that's probably the biggest thing I took away from this conversation. The strongest account aren't always created by the player who spent the most during the first 3 days. It actually like 99% yes, but if you compare it to free-to-play players and the one with knowledge, the difference is going to be crazy. Not chasing power, not chasing random upgrade, not chasing whatever looks exciting. Build foundation. Because the scary part is that many players think they're falling behind because somebody spent money, which they have advantage for sure. When sometimes they're falling behind because somebody made just better decision, and those are two different problems. So I'm curious. Looking back at your first kingdom, what was the biggest mistake you made during the first few days? And did you realize it immediately or only months later when the consequences finally show it up? Anyway, guys, this is going to be for this video. Huge thank you to all channel members for supporting the channel. And if you do like to support the channel as well, you can check out the join button below. Members get early access to videos, exclusive content, member shoutouts, and Warword members can reach out to me directly for strategy and account advices. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.